Arguably one of the most recognisable pieces of music to be heard on radio in Australia for a long, long time. And I speak of Pastoral, which was the theme for Blue Hills over 27 years on ABC Radio. And a man who can tell us a lot about those years is my studio guest, one Peter Philp.
Good morning, Alex. Lovely to be with you.
Well, I'm delighted that you could make it in to talk about old radio, and particularly this publication. Now, I'm holding in my hand a book entitled Drama in Silent Rooms, and it's a radio history, or history of radio drama in Australia from the 20s through until the 70s. It's a bit of a tome, isn't it?
It is. It's a long one. In fact, somebody said it's almost as big as the Bible. I suppose to some degree it's the Bible of radio drama. But it's a tribute, Alex. People say, why did you ever write it? 25 years of on and off, because
yes.
I have had to earn my board and crusts. But I think it's a tribute to a fabulous troupe of actors, writers and producers, and also technical people that produced, I would say, if not the best, one of the best forms of radio drama in the world. There's no doubt about it that Australian radio actors were the best in the world.
Oh,
the Brits would come out here and they were just amazed at what we did in one morning. They would take a week to do.
Right.
And actors would say that when they learned that they had to get into a character within an hour, they would be standing there. These are guys that had been on the stage. These are people that had been on the BBC for years. And they would be standing there, their hands would be shaking.
Yeah.
You hear the script shaking because we can't do this in an hour.
Right.
We take a whole morning, or we go and have lunch and we come back in the afternoon and rehearse again.
I remember they'd do it on the fly.
The fly, George Edwards was a bit notorious, but George was very smart. He only did it with stuff that people that were in Dad and Dave for years and Martin's Corner and these shows that people knew very well. And, of course, there was no second best. Even Grace Gibson and Donovan Joyce, they wouldn't employ people that were semi-professional or even good actors. They had only excellent actors.
Yes.
And that was the only hierarchy. There was no hierarchy in radio drama. The ABC later on used to pay their stars an added fee. But commercial radio production, everyone, whether they did one paragraph or they were the star, they got the same fee. So there was no hierarchy. There were no prima donnas. The only hierarchy was, we will only work with people that are excellent.
Yes.
And when they held auditions, now and again, because they were running out of actors. People were going overseas to the war. A big stage show would come on, so they take the advantage of going away for a year.
Right.
And they ran out of actors. Which is unheard of. And when they auditioned, they might have 20 or 30 people. They would be lucky to get one.
Yes.
Kevin O'Gorman, my old mate from 3KZ, said John Hickling, the notorious John Hickling, we'll talk about him later, he ran out of actors, so he said, we're going to hold auditions at 3DB. Well, Kevin said they were lined up almost from the old gas and fuel building at St Paul's, right up to 3DB. He said there must have been a couple of hundred. He said 2 people got jobs, me and Jim Tregonning, who was the breakfast announcer at 3AW before Jeff Mannion.
Yes.
Now, neither Kevin or Jim would say they were actors, so virtually nobody got a job out of it. So it was you had to be a perfectionist.
Well, you did. I remember interviewing Peg Christensen, the lovely Margaret
Lovely Margaret.
Lovely lady. And we had the best time. And she was it was like it was just yesterday. And she said, Alex, I'd be in a taxi all day in Sydney going around from the various production houses. And I said, well, you must have earned a lot of money. Oh, yeah, 10 bob an episode.
Well, that's right. I suppose they did make money because of the bulk they did.
They did, yes.
There was only the select few, and they were constantly used, and they were so versatile. George Edwards, the man of 1,000 voices, he could play 6 and 7 parts, and unless you really were an expert, you couldn't pick him.
Well, you couldn't, and I think he does some on Dad and Dave. We run that on Saturday mornings here at Golden Days, and I'm not sure who's he and...
He was a great actor. And people like Nigel Lovell. Nigel Lovell had a beautiful voice, but he could play an American as good as the Americans. And in some of the Lindsay Hardy material, like Mask for Alexis, he's Michael Raven. He has this wonderfully evil French accent that you'd say that's not Nigel Lovell, but it is Nigel Lovell.
Grace Gibson sends me a lot of information and a lot of stuff, and we give away certain things on air as prizes. And he sent me Dinner at Antoine's, and in it is Kevin Brennan. But Kevin Brennan's also in the Cadbury Show in a totally different voice.
Totally different.
It's amazing.
And what a great voice.
Oh, terrific voice, and so cultured.
You know the story about Guy Dolman. Guy Dolman, people say, he made his name in Dossier and Demetrius. Well, he didn't actually. He was well established then. He was in Hagen Circus, but he was a co-star.
Yes.
He wasn't the star, but Grant Andrews, the role he became the superstar.
That's right.
Paul Jackman, the producer, said, I made Guy Dolman. But these voices were just wonderful. But Kevin Brennan, often Kevin Brennan isn't given the credit he deserves, but he was one of the top actors. When he went to England, he was one of the stars of A Mask for Alexis that Lindsay Hardy turned into a television show.
Right. Well, of course, Guy Dolman also went on to be a compere of the Ford Show.
He did.
With the Macquarie Network.
He did, which was an unusual role for him. And then, of course, he went overseas and starred with Michael Caine in Funeral in Berlin and the Ipcress Files.
All those wonderful...
that lovely voice, you'll tell.
Now, listen, here's a piece of music, and tell me, what do you think this might be the theme to?
We just need to bring Roland Strong in, and he'd say D24.
That's right.
What a wonderful series that was. Didn't sell well interstate because Sydney didn't like the D24 bit, but it was an extraordinary success in Victoria. Something like 50% ratings it got at one stage.
Huge.
Can you imagine a radio station today with 50% of the ratings?
Absolutely huge. And on the 3DB story, Roland Strong was telling us about his involvement, and he would dramatise that.
He would spend a lot of time with the police because the police were difficult to work with because they did, we don't want the media. Anyway, they discovered that this would be a great recruitment program. So Roland had to play the professional to say, well, this has got to be a radio program.
Yeah.
However, the police said, well, if we can have a look at the scripts and check them over, we're quite happy to sponsor. So they were a sponsor of D24.
And only names and place names have been changed to protect the innocent,
Produced in the studios of Hector Crawford by Dorothy Crawford.
Now, this book, Drama in Silent Rooms, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I mean, it's a credit to you because you've kept alive in a lot of people's minds or rekindled the interest in these wonderful golden years of radio.
Well, look, thank you for saying that. Look, I very humbly say that I was the person that put it all together. But it is a tribute to the actors. It is a tribute to anyone connected professionally to the world of radio drama, but also those wonderful listeners that were treated disgracefully by radio stations. I worked for one radio station. They played Dr. Paul and Portia for 20 years and suddenly changed their format and chopped the jolly thing without any explanation of how it ended. So I think we pay a tribute to those wonderful loyal audiences that bought the Jolly Sponsors products, listened every night for the next exciting episode. So, look, I'm glad you say that because I would like this to be remembered. I think I've said somewhere that I think this is one of the most important pieces of Australian history. It's been forgotten.
It has.
When you talk about performing arts, theatre is wonderful, dance is wonderful, but this was also unique. This is one of the great pieces of performing arts. It's not just mass entertainment. The Dossiers on Demetrius, the Lux Radio Theatre, the Celtex Radio Theatre, White Coolies, this is not mass entertainment.
You're quite right, and we've got White Coolies. We've run White Coolies on this station, and I had the great privilege of speaking to Gwen Friend. Mm-hmm. I interviewed her over the telephone. Sadly, she's passed on since that time, but she could remember it like it was just yesterday.
Well, I think it was very special Fifi Bambard. It was all women.
Yes.
Virtually the whole cast was women.
Yep.
Adapted by a woman, produced by dear Fifi Bambard was bigger than Texas. She was a wonderful actress. But in the book, I do a whole section on White Coolies. I remember, and I got a bit annoyed, when Ruth Cracknell, Ruth was the star of it.
Yes.
When she died, everyone said, mother and son, and this stage, that stage. No one ever mentioned that she was ever in radio.
No.
When I spoke to Ruth, she said one of the finest performances I ever did, and one of the most memorable, was White Coolies.
Yeah.
She said, we were unprofessional. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, no matter how powerful a script is, how emotional a script is, you are always in control of yourself.
Yes.
But she said in White Coolies, the script was so powerful that people like June Salter and myself, we cried.
Yes.
We cried.
Yes. And that was evident at the end. In the final episode, they flew Sister Betty Jeffrey up from Melbourne to record she was there when they recorded the last episode. And it was palpable.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
The feeling in the studio.
Yeah.
Let's just pause for a second and have this memory. Royalty is the piece, and it was played by the Melody Light Orchestra, conducted by one Ole Jensen, who is...
Now tell me about him. You've just told me something today.
That's Robert Farnon. He used that as a nom de plume on certain recordings where there was a contractual situation. But interesting to see that it's the Melody Light Orchestra. Some of them were on... these recordings on Chapel were on red and white labels, and the Melody Light Orchestra were on grey and blue labels.
They were.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very
lovely
interesting.
to talk to someone that knows the business. I won't mention the station, but it is a national broadcaster. I had to tell them their history before they did the interview. They had no idea that the ABC ever did drama. So it's lovely to talk to you, Alex.
I find that incredible. But, of course, we are dealing with the younger generation.
Yeah, we are. And we are dealing with something, and sadly, that went away. And I think, if the commercials could ever justify dropping drama, I don't think the ABC could.
No.
No. And,
well, I mean, they're funded by the country.
Exactly.
And the taxpayer.
Exactly.
But, look... It's lost to us possibly forever, but that's just the way things go. Look at television and variety.
Look at television.
I mean, I've said to countless people that I've spoken to on here, old stages, Ron Blaskett, for argument's sake, great vent. Where do sight acts go now to perform? There used to be things like New Faces and all that on television. Now, all you get is kids singing.
Exactly. Look, it's a bit of a sad world out there, but Eddie Barmer, my old boss at 3KZ, used to say, everything comes round in circles. But I said, Eddie, what about talkback radio? Peter, he said, we were doing that in 1928. But look, there's some wonderful stuff out there. And the other thing too, Alex, that I think was wonderful were those big Sunday night plays.
Oh, yes.
The Celtex Theatre, when those big fanfares rang out, the sponsor was a national sponsor, so it was big-time stuff. Yep. But the ads were written almost beautifully to suit the drama. They weren't high-pressure ads.
No.
The same with the Lux Radio Theatre.
Yep.
And the General Motors are. Marvellous stuff. And they would all dress up. They'd go to the Macquarie Auditorium, or they'd go to that beautiful, when Lux moved to TUW, they moved to that beautiful theatre in George Street, which in fact I think was even better than the Macquarie Auditorium, right opposite the Sydney Town Hall,
right,
and had a great big chandelier in the middle of it. And they'd come out in their evening dress. Dinah Shearing told me one time, she said, we came in on a Bondi tram in our evening dress. Everybody's looking at us. Where are you going? And the guys would be in their tuxedos and black ties. Maybe Peter Finch, who was a wonderful character in radio, apparently had one dress shirt. and often he would be late because he was picking it up from the laundry to come and do his performance.
That's fascinating. It really is. I just love talking about the old days and the people that have gone before. And a lot of them, luckily, have been interviewed, have recorded interviews, so that we have that to look back on. Has there been anyone who's really stood out to you in terms of their knowledge or their giving to you in terms of this book?
Well, there was a lot of them. I mean, I admire Rod Taylor. I mean, Rod Taylor came out from Hollywood to visit his family on a very tight schedule, and Ray Barrett said, maybe he'll talk to you. So anyway, we sat at the Gazebo Motel at the King's Cross,
right.
And I said, "Look, thank you, Rod. Thank you." He said, "Hang on, I'm thanking you." He said, "Because this is just wonderful what you're doing." So Rod Taylor was great. Ruth Cracknell was great. But one of my heroes from radio was Bruce Stewart, who played Gregory Keane in the first three.
All right.
And we had a wonderful day together. And he was like James Condon, an absolute born storyteller. And suddenly he'd go off. And Bud Tingwell was another one. I remember going over to Bud's home in Doncaster, and again, I looked at my watch. I said, "Bud, it's 1 o'clock." I said, "I've kept you up all night telling stories." He said, "Peter, just hang on. There's a couple more stories I want to tell you." So at 3 o'clock we finally left. These people were wonderful, but probably. And I had the privilege of presenting my wife, Nain, who inspired this book, with the first book. But book number 3, I presented to Beverly Dunn, who was a Melbourne actress.
Oh, yes.
And Beverly was just superb to me. Again, I was just a stranger, and we met in the city and I interviewed her. She said, "Now, anything I can do to help you?" She gave me all these silent lines, and she said, "If they complain, just say Beverly gave it to you, and if you have any trouble, let me know." Well, they're all wonderful, except one actor, John Morgan. And I thought John did a lot of stuff with Keith Eden in Melbourne and Douglas Kelly. Yeah. And anyway, I said to John, he said, "Oh, look," he said, it's all over now, Peter. It's all over, and I'm sick and tired of it. They never did anything for me." And he was quite grumpy. And I didn't push him. He said, no, give me a mention here, but I don't know. So anyway, I spoke to Beverly about a week later, and she said, "How'd you go?" I said, "Well, 9 out of 10. The only one that didn't want to be spoken to was John Morgan." She said, "Okay, leave it to me." Anyway, 2 days later, she rang me up. She said, "Give him a ring." Rang him up. "Oh, Peter, I'd love to talk to you." So Beverly is very special.
That's amazing, isn't it? Now, John Morgan, we've got a program on called With a Song in My Heart, and he's a narrator on that. And also he did the Burtons of Banner Street.
He did. He was, I think he was Paul.
Yes.
Paul. There were
great voice.
Beautiful voice. Sometimes could be confused with Douglas Kelly. Douglas was a little deeper.
Yes.
But no, Morgan was one, and he could read a commercial.
Oh.
He and Keith Eden
Yes.
virtually ran the market here. Great actor, but sadly, someone that would be forgotten. There were a lot of people, Bettine Kaufman, Dennis Glennie. Now, people say, "Who's Dennis Glennie?" Dennis Glennie played about half a dozen. He played a lot of radio theatre like Lux, but very few serials. But he will never ever be forgotten for his role of Yachty Blum in Dossier on Demetrius, that little Spider-Man that kept knives down his singlet.
Well, see, this is the thing I love about these radio serials. We're running them here on Golden Days.
Good on you.
We're, at the moment, we've got 2 Roads to Samara, and the next one will be the Smell of Terror, which is the 5th in the series.
And the end, sadly, the end.
which is a great sadness. But we also have the Castlereagh line. We've got Dad and Dave. We've got Nightbeat.
Which one are you playing, Hart Maguire or Alan White?
Hart Maguire.
Yeah,
Hart Maguire is in the system with us at the moment. But I just love them, and the people love them.
Of course they do. Of course they did. They were never consulted.
No.
2UW almost had a meltdown when they took their serials off in Sydney, but they said, "Oh, well, we're changing the format, who cares? We're only after young people." But I think young people, look, Alex, it's not a matter of just playing all the old stuff. Why can't we have contemporary drama?
Yes, exactly right. Speaking of the Lux Radio Theatre... The piece is called London Playhouse. Sydney Torch conducts the New Century Orchestra. Great, isn't it?
Now, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
This must have been the Macquarie version, was it? Because when there were three quite separate lives for Lux. Lux began at Macquarie, went to Commonwealth, which was 2UW, and finally everyone thought it had gone forever. Yeah. It came back on 2UE with Paul Jacklin.
Yeah.
Now, this must be one of the early ones.
This is the early one. Yeah, this is the early one. It's on it would be FDH, I think, New Century. Yeah, FDH. Mm. So a great piece of music, though. And
it was one of the greatest events in Australian radio history because it was big in America, and the plan was that they knew they couldn't get away with just running American version here. So I think about every fortnight they did a local version and then they did an American version. And they used film stars. This is going to be the big attraction, film star. Would you believe within 6 months the American version was dead here?
Yeah.
And it was all Australian.
Yeah.
We loved Australian drama.
Yes, indeed. And Grace Gibson did the same thing. They originally brought out all of these American scripts and then said, let's get rid of them and then do something else. The other thing that we're running is the Passing Parade.
Now, which one? Not Donovan Joyce's.
No, this is the John Doremus one.
Doremus, yeah.
Now, you know the story about the Passing Parade. They originally wrote 133 episodes, and it didn't go all that well in America, so they decided they were going to get rid of it. But it did very well here in Australasia, because Grace Gibson had the whole of the distribution down in this area, including the Pacific Islands and all that. So what happened was that I think it was Ross Napier wrote the scripts. They telexed them to John Doremus in Chicago, and he recorded them on tape and sent them back to Australia.
Incredible, isn't it?
1,300 episodes they went to. And so quite often you'll get a mispronunciation like Geelong instead of Geelong. But that's the story of how that happens. And of course the racehorse Doremus was named after John Doremus.
Okay,
Remember that?
Yes. Well, now you've also mentioned someone that deserves a mention also is Ross Napier. What
indeed.
A great...
Yeah,
great. He and Peter Yalland were the original scriptwriters of Address Unknown, which I think was one of the best self-contained 30-minute programs. Remember that, Henry Simon?
Yeah,
Lionel Stevens.
Yeah, we ran it before Nightbeat. We had Address Unknown and Lionel Stevens.
Very, very good.
Oh, terrific stuff.
Again, one of the top British actors that came out here because Australia was so good. He wanted to be in Australia. Joe McCormick from Canada. Remember Joe McCormick in Gunsmoke? That rasping voice.
I think we're going to run out of time. I can see this just clocking over. When you're talking about things like this, it just seems to go. I wanted you to get a plug-in on this.
The book, yes.
Where can you get this book from?
Well, you can. The simplest thing is to look online, but some people say, I'm fed up with this, not looking online. There's a phone number. It's available from a bookshop in Glen Waverley, 9803 4481. Now, if you're anything like me, you can't copy down numbers quickly. 9803 4481. That's bookpod.com.au if you want to look on the internet. But you look under Drama in Silent Rooms by Peter Philp. Up will come Grace Gibson and also BookPod.
Well, look, Peter, I want to commend you on this. I've got a partial way through this book. It is just wonderful. It is fascinating reading. And if you are interested at all in what we had here back in those days, do yourself a favour. It's reasonably priced for the effort, I think. Brilliant.
Well, 25 years, and unfortunately it can never be done again because a lot of people have gone to God.
They've gone to God.
And but they were just lovely people. I think that's the other thing to say, that I think I learned not only were they the best actors in the world, but they were wonderful human beings. And I think that's the highest credit you can give somebody.
Praise indeed. Peter Philp, I want to thank you so very much for coming in and being my studio guest.
Can I compliment you and say this is the best interview I've had? Would you say? You sit back and you listen, you don't right over the top of people. Congratulations.
Thank you, Peter, and all the very best. And if you have another book, let us know, won't you? We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye for now.